Hey guys, so now that a few days, or almost a week, I guess at this point, have passed, I wanted to make a video discussing the situation of LR Gohan and LR Cell not getting their EZA'S on global Dokkan. So I made a tweet here, and I'll just read this, and then we'll go through some of the responses that I received, and I'll give my thoughts as, I guess, comments on the responses that I received as part of this. That's the best way I think I could do this. It's better to do it this way, I think, than just going on a 12-minute ramble, I think, from at least the perspective of you guys, right? You guys probably would much rather see something like this instead. It's not often I make videos like this pertaining to Dokkan anymore, but I definitely think this situation has impacted people to the point where it's worth doing this. So let's go ahead and this is my tweet that I made. So now that we've had some time to process the situation, let me know your thoughts on global Dokkan not receiving the LR Gohan and Cell EZA'S. This will be used to complement a video. And also, I specifically did wait about a week before making this video because I wanted to give people some time to gather their thoughts, and also for myself as well. Like, I was pretty upset that we didn't get them either. And so I just wanted, you know, some extra time to not just be blinded by anger or whatever, right? So we have some, you know, logical reasoning going on in our head while we look at these responses. So all right, let's start here. So we have the first response. It's fine. I'm not expecting global to see any significant leap in difficulty for several months, and that seems to be what the two are balanced around. These types of things are to be expected at this point and don't really bother me too much. I can see that. I think I don't like. Are people mostly disappointed that global's not getting the EZA'S just because of how good the characters are? Or just because they want to have usable versions of those characters? Because right now, you're not really using either of those. Like, Gohan is mildly usable, just as a link battery for like all the Goku characters, right? Cell's not. You're not using that int Cell. Period. There's no setup where I think that int Cell is really going to be that great. So at least in my opinion, like, even if they were significantly worse post EZA, I still would have been a little bit upset. And it's not just because, you know, oh, I need the characters to beat the events or whatever, but just because I actually do like those characters and I want to use them. And I think the biggest problem, which we'll see if we get comments about this later on, is just the way that they handle the situation in general. We know Global knows how to copy/paste, so if they weren't going to share the celebration like this on both versions, they should have made it clear these would be delayed on Global. Okay, yeah, this is actually exactly what I was just talking about. I knew we were going to get a comment like this. So this, I think, encapsulates the main mindset from most Global players. This comment right here. We went into this celebration on Global pretty much assuming that we were going to be getting the same, you know, content as JP. And I think the main thing that solidified that was the Gogeta and Broly EZA. I think those characters EZAing, Global getting those at the same time as JP, pretty much solidified that this was in completeness, like the entirety of the celebration was a shared celebration. It's possible that they maybe were just like, okay, yeah, we'll just give Global the benefit of the doubt, and we'll just, you know, Superhero is a worldwide movie at this point. We'll give them the Gohan and the Piccolo, and then that will be good enough for them. But then they went above and beyond that, and they not only gave us the Gohan and Piccolo banners at the same time, they gave us the Chain Battle, they gave us the EZA'S, they gave us the Infinite Dragon Ball History stage. So like they gave us everything at the same time as JP. And so that in itself, like that decision by them to give us not just the banners, but literally everything else at the same time, created an expectation that Global was then therefore going to receive whatever future parts of this anniversary, aka part 2 or part 3, however many parts it was gonna have. Global was also going to receive whatever JP was going to get in parts 2, 3, 4, 5, however long it went on for. And so when, you know, the EZA'S were announced for JP with the Gohan and Cell, and then Global didn't get any kind of announcement or teaser, and then the EZA'S came out on JP and there was still nothing on Global, people were very, very upset because, number one, we had that expectation going into the release that we were going to be getting that. And I'm not blaming people for having that expectation, because this is completely the fault of the game for creating that expectation. you can have the mindset of, oh, well, we should never have an expectation, or, you know, we should always go into these things with the least amount of, with like just very low expectations, right? And I think that's also a fair mindset to have as well, but you can't really blame people for being upset about what happened in this in the celebration, right? You can't tell me that people don't have the right to be upset about Global not getting these characters when there was a clear expectation pre-established by the game that this celebration, the contents of the celebration, were going to be completely and entirely shared by both versions, because that's what it was. Literally up until this point, we had everything exactly the same on both versions until we got to this Cell and Gohan situation, because we don't have the EZA'S and we also don't have the Infinite Dragon Ball history stages. So for whatever reason, they're treating those aspects of the celebration as JP only for now. Obviously, Global's going to get it at some point later on, but for whatever reason, those parts of the celebration remain exclusive to JP. So again, I think people do have the right to be upset about this, and I don't blame people at all for being upset about it. I spent a lot of time on that point, but that was kind of the main thing I wanted to say here. So basically, in conclusion to that point, I will conclude that it is 100% the fault of the game for creating that false expectation. And I don't think I would really put so much blame on people who are upset about it. I think it was logical and reasonable to expect that Global was going to be getting those EZA'S as well. I think it's a very confusing situation. This was a worldwide celebration, and it's fair to assume that if JP is getting content in a worldwide celebration, Global should be getting the same. It blurs the lines of what to expect in these games, and it's disappointing as a global player. Did they ever like really specifically market this as like a same time celebration? I believe in the what was it, like the dev newsletter thing? It was the video that they put out literally right after JP got the initial like sneak peek at Beast, Gohan, and Piccolo, and they were like, oh, Global's going to be getting these characters as well. I don't know if they specifically said like the entire celebration was going to be a quote unquote worldwide celebration, but like I just said, more so than it being a worldwide celebration in definition, it was a worldwide celebration in appearance based on how they handled the campaigns across both versions, because again, every single part of these celebrations were identical on both versions up until the EZA'S. So I think that's where they screwed up, and I guess the best way to describe the way that they handled this was that they were just, and this has been a common theme across many different global releases, is they are just completely tone deaf when it comes to a lot of the things on the global side of the game. I think a lot of the choices they make sense logically speaking, but I think it's possible to make logical decisions while also being completely tone deaf to your audience, right? So for example, the biggest thing, and the biggest example that will illustrate this is when global players were literally spamming their Twitter account for days at this point, like 2-3 days in a row after JP received the Gohan and Cell EZA'S, and literally were spamming their Twitter account with, okay, this sucks, please give us the EZA'S, and they were spamming them with like the images of the EZA for Cell and Gohan. So unless they literally don't look at the comments at all, which I know for a fact that they do look at the comments, they should have at least some general understanding what people are feeling like about the game. And so after that, the biggest tone deaf move they could possibly make is to release a survey about the game, which they did. They released a survey. Not only did they release a survey, they released a survey that literally had nothing to do with like this actual celebration. It was just completely, it was about like the EZA vote for Beerus and God Goku, which was months and months and months ago at this point. So I don't really like, releasing a survey is fine, right? It's fine to release a survey, but the tone deafness that comes with releasing that survey is just the timing in which it was put out. Like, do you guys think the results of that survey are going to be representative of how people actually feel about the game, and not just going to be completely blinded by the fact that people just want Cell and Gohan's EZA? You're not going to get an actual like representation of how people are feeling, because that's what people want right now, is what they don't have, which is exactly why it's super tone deaf. And I feel like they just don't know what they're doing. That's the whole point of that. While they can make logical decisions that could help the game in the long run, giving stones for completing a survey, they want to get a feel for how their players are feeling about the game. But hello, do you guys pay attention to anything or no? So that's, I think, part of the issue here for Global. I think the lack of care for the global side is kind of hilarious, but in a sad way. They don't even give global the bare minimum at this point. And that kind of ties into what I was just talking about. It's very obvious they pay way closer attention to the JP side of the game as opposed to the global side of the game. And I think at this point, you know, we're almost 8 years into the game. This is definitely something that people need to come to grips with. If you're a global player and, you know, you're somebody who's constantly looking at the JP version and you're like, okay, well, you know, I'm really excited for this character. When is it coming to global? And you always are comparing the two versions. At that point, I would just tell you that this is never really going to be resolved. And you're always going to have this problem of JP getting stuff that you want and you having to wait long periods of time before that stuff comes to global. So if that's you, if that's something that you're doing, my recommendation would be to start playing JP Dokkan, because you won't have to deal with that anymore. And I think if you're somebody who's constantly, you know, I don't want to say obsessing over it, because there's people who don't obsess over it who are still upset about the wait that global has to do and just certain ways that global is treated differently than JP. But if you're somebody who constantly does look at that stuff and worries about that stuff, then just to save yourself the trouble of doing that, because I don't think that's number one, I don't think it's healthy to do that. And number two, it definitely does impact your enjoyment of the game as well. I would say at that point, it probably does make more sense just to make the switch over to JP, because you don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. But I do think this is an accurate comment, just the lack of care for global. I'm not going to disagree that there's a lack of care for global, but a lot of it at the end of the day comes down to our expectations. But in this specific situation with the Gohan and Cell EZA'S, I really don't blame people for having that expectation, because it was clearly established by the game, right? So I'm overall disappointed. These units are very special to me, so it sucks that we're not getting them anytime soon. Even still, it's not the end of the world. I'll live. Overall, I think the celebration was still a major success. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty level-headed and fair evaluation, I think. It depends. Considering the celebration a success, I think definitely just depends on your like what you value in these celebrations. If you're somebody who just values content, like we actually did get a lot of content in the celebration, I think. There's a lot of stuff to do. The rewards are fairly good. As much as you can complain about Beast Gohan and Orange Piccolo, I think Orange Piccolo as a character is insanely powerful. Beast Gohan, I think less so, but the biggest thing for me was, I've been talking about this since I saw the superhero movie back in June. We're now in January. And finally, they're giving us like the sort of main characters from the movie. So it's what, 6-7 months since the movie released. The biggest thing for me was being able to play as the new characters. And so in that regard, I am kind of disappointed in the way that they handled the characters, but as like an objective look at how the celebration compares to other similar celebrations, it was a very, very good celebration. But as a personal note to the celebration, super disappointed about how they handled Beast Gohan. So that for me is going to leave a blemish on the way that they handled this. And then now, obviously, we're going to add the EZA Gohan and Piccolo situation to this as well. Unfortunately, that's always going to be the deal on global. We have to get used to the fact that we're not going to get the same things as JP at the same time unless they do a miracle and align both versions, which I will tell you this for sure, it's not happening. 7 months later, we got Golden Frieza, so I'm not surprised we didn't get their EZAs nor the collection of epic battle stages. People got their hopes up because we thought this was a joint celebration, but in reality, it is not. We got both banners and most of the stuff at the same time, but it didn't mean we would get all of it. Okay, so this is basically a point that I already talked about, but I think this last line here, where he says, we got both banners and most of the stuff at the same time, but it didn't mean we would get all of it. That is a true statement. It is a 100% true statement to assume that just because we get every single item of the celebration at the same time as JP, that doesn't guarantee that we're going to be able to get like everything moving forward at the same time. But as I already mentioned several times in this video, them doing this and then releasing every single thing at the same time for both versions creates the expectation that for the remainder portion of these celebrations, because it kind of was 2 celebrations going on at the same time, we had the superhero celebration and we had the New Year celebration. It was kind of a mixture of both of those. But remember, Gogeta and Broly, EZA's, were part of the New Year celebration, so it was technically separate from the superhero celebration. But on global, we still got the Broly and Gogeta EZA's. Like, I think it's, again, it is fair and logical to assume that everything else we're releasing as part of the celebration would be shared by both versions. So I'm not going to blame people for thinking that way, but this is a correct thought process as well, right? Because this has happened in the past as well, where Global and JP have shared celebrations, and JP has just received extra stuff that Global didn't. So we have precedent for this as well. All right, what else? I think these EZAs have been wanted and anticipated for multiple years now, and things this big should be released on both versions. Waiting 4 to 6 months for Dokkan Fest exclusives is fine, but there's really no reason why Global should have to wait for EZAs. Yeah, I mean, it does take a lot less effort to create EZAs than it does to create brand new units. It's basically like the same thing on Legends too. Like Legends, like Zenkai is a character. All they got to do is just change the way the character actually performs and the mechanics of the character's kit work in the game. You don't have to go in and create new models and new animations and voice lines and all this stuff. It's already in the game for you. So it's the same thing with EZAs in Dokkan. Like EZAs are, you know, you just go into the code, you change a few lines of code, and that's it. The EZA is finished. So I agree. It's much easier for them to create and release EZAs at the same time in both versions. But yeah, that's unfortunately not what happened. Lack of communication both sides gives us, mostly Global, makes me grateful for gachas like Grand Cross. They're definitely not the best, but at least they respond to backlash quick and often. Yeah, I am not going to pretend like I know what goes on behind the scenes, because again, I say this constantly because people think we somehow like have insider information about how this stuff works, which we don't. So I'm not going to pretend like I know what goes on behind the scenes, but I'm assuming that any kind of communication they, you know, want to give to us, whether it's in the form of directly responding to criticism or to address certain things, would have to go through multiple approval processes, because it's a very convoluted way that this works, right? So Akatsuki is the one who creates the game, they're the developers of the game. Bandai basically are the ones who are overseeing, right? Akatsuki, who's basically, Bandai is borrowing the IP. And then up along the chain more, then you have like Shueisha and Toei who actually hold the IP of Dragon Ball. So it's this very, what do I want to call this? Very compartmentalized, like bureaucratic chain of command, right? Goes from at the top, you have Shueisha and Bandai who actually control the IP of Dragon Ball. Then you have Bandai who's essentially borrowing the IP of Dragon Ball from Shueisha and Bandai. And then Bandai is, you know, contracting with the developers to create the game. So it's like a three-pronged system going up and down the chain. So in terms of like actually creating a stream of communication between the game and the players, I am assuming that there is some approval process that they have to go through. And I don't know what that involves, right? So it could actually take multiple weeks to get like a simple statement approved and published in the game, which would completely that would still be I'm talking like 2 weeks from now coming out in the game to address the situation that happened last week, which is completely possible. I think that's not out of the realm of possibility at all. Again, I'm not sure that's how it works, but that's at least what I'm assuming. So maybe, you know, they just think it's not really worth to directly address people's feedback like that, especially when it comes down to things that I guess technically we're not supposed to know about, because there's this argument I've seen people making where it's like, oh, well, global players are not supposed to know about what happens in the JP version of the game, right? Which I definitely don't think is true, because whenever we have global first or same time stuff release, they always go to make a point that whatever is at the same time or global first is either same time or global first, whether it's in the news or whether it's in like the newsletter stuff. It's always like coming first to the international version, or coming to the international version at the same time as the Japanese version. Like, why would they go out of their way to specifically state those things if people didn't even know what happened on the JP version? So I think they know that we know, right? That's, at the end of the day, I think that's a fact. They know that we know, and then they go out of their way to tell us that, so that it makes us more excited about what's going to come out. So I don't buy the argument that it's like, you know, global players are, you know, the global and JP are separate games. Global players are not supposed to know what goes on JP, because I think that's complete just BS. I don't buy that at all. All right. New Year's was never New Year's was never promised to be shared like a movie celebration. So they have a valid reason not to give us Gohan and Cell. However, they did give Global, Gogeta, and Broly, who were New Year. So long story short, it makes no sense. I 100% agree with that. I think the biggest problem with Global not getting Gohan and Cell is, how is that any different? How is that any different than Global getting the Broly and Gogeta EZAs. It is the exact same situation. I have no answer. The only logical answer is because they don't want to give Global these super powerful characters this early. Is that really the reason? That's a stupid reason, because it's not. Like, sure, Global gets these super powerful characters right now. Why does that matter? We have the same content. Global and JP both have the movie Red Zone stages. Global and JP both have the GT Red Zone stages. We both have the Wicked Bloodline Red Zone stages. We both have the Red Ribbon Army Red Zone stages. We both have the Cell Max event. We have all the same difficult content. All the most difficult content in the game is shared between both versions. Sure, JP is about to get probably more difficult content than Global, just because they're about to head into their anniversary, while Global has to wait until July for that. But just like the next 6 months, we already have characters who are able to dominate the entire game. Why would it matter if Global got these EZAs now? It wouldn't. It really does not matter. So I think the fact that Global did get Gogeta and Broly as part of the New Year celebration at the same time as JP, that established, again, this goes back to my initial point, is that established an expectation to where, okay, now we're going to be getting everything at the same time, and then obviously we did not. All right, we'll do a few more. I don't want this video to go on forever. It's rough, but I play JP, so I don't really care that they didn't get it. All I can say is that's tough. I mean, sure, if you're a JP player, then this thread doesn't even really apply to you. A major problem because it shows that Global will always be behind. Purple Cooler Army EZA isn't even... Yeah. the Int LR Metal Cooler Army EZA, that character EZA'd, I think it was around the same time as the Resurrection of Blues coming out on JP, which was back in like June. It was like late May, early June or something when that character got their EZA. So not really sure. Just a lot of scheduling mishaps, I guess we'll call it, going on in Global. I just think it's dumb to have a same time release celebration and exclude something the entire player base has been looking forward to for years from one side of the game. It's very possible that we may have to wait until June or something when most of the hype will have died. I guess we can look at this from like a positive and negative rating system as well. So if you, let's just say, if you are the developers, if you are Akatsuki and you have to make a decision, all right, we have, you know, choice number one, which is, do we release the EZAs at the same time? Choice number one is yes. Choice number two is no. If you do release the EZAs at the same time on both versions, as compared to if you didn't release the EZAs at the same time on both versions, what are the pros and cons to that? Do the pros outweigh the cons, right? I assume that's part of the decision-making process that they go through to do this. But then again, I'm not going to pretend like I know, you know, what goes on behind closed doors there. And again, we don't know what the future of the game looks like. There could be a perfectly valid reason as to why they didn't release the EZAs and Global at the same time. Maybe there's a much more fitting celebration and much more fitting time to release those EZAs on Global as opposed to JP. Do I think that you know, the pros of waiting outweigh the cons of waiting? Definitely not. If it was up to me and I'm weighing the pros and cons of this decision, the pros of releasing this EZA now at the same time on Global vastly outweigh the pros of delaying the EZAs. And so, I mean, it just seems like a very logical decision, at least to me, and I am assuming to most of you who are watching this, that it would just become a much more enjoyable experience for everybody if these EZAs came out now as opposed to waiting. So I'm not really sure, again, what the decision-making process looked like to delay this. Overall, just pretty miffed. It feels unfair that JP gets to use the new EZAs to help blow past the new red zone stages way more easily. Meanwhile, Global can still genuinely struggle at times trying to clear just one stage. Yeah, I mean, that is a fair point, because we both at the same time just got the same new difficult content. Both JP and Global both got their Red Ribbon Army red zone stages. I've definitely seen some people struggling with the Cell Max stage. And if you look at how the AGL Gohan and Cell characters basically have been handled since their release, I mean, are they the most returning characters on any banners? Like, you see the AGL Cell, or sorry, the AGL Gohan and Int Cell constantly returning on these big Dokkan Fest LR banners. Pretty much for the past 3 years straight, they've been returning on almost every single major anniversary banner, Worldwide Celebration banner. All these big time banners have brought back Gohan and Cell. So if you're a player who's been playing for like any extended period of time, you're going to have those characters and you would be ready with their EZAs to help you clear these stages like Cell Max and the Gamma stage. So that does kind of, yeah, I agree that that does feel unfair considering we both are getting the same difficult stages at the same time, right? I mean, it's very if both versions are getting the same difficult content, but then only one version are getting characters that can help them clear the difficult content, that's literally the definition of unfairness. That is literally the definition of unfairness. I think that when you're holding a campaign that's celebrated on both versions at the same time, releasing content that's exclusive only to one version is a scummy thing to do. Yes, agreed. No matter what their reason may be, it is never going to justify the situation to me. I actually would agree with that as well. I think there's nothing they can say that would actually justify them holding back. And the main reason is because everything else was released at the same time. Why are you withholding this? If the Gohan and Cell EZAs were part of a celebration that was not shared with Global, nobody would be complaining, right? When JP got the LR Bojack EZA, nobody on Global was complaining that the LR Bojack EZA wasn't coming to Global because Global wasn't celebrating that celebration at the same time. This is the opposite of that. This is the complete opposite of that. We are celebrating the celebration at the same time. So of course, us on Global are going to complain that we're not being treated equally, which I think 100% is fair and that makes sense. And there's not really much anybody can say to refute that. It's the same problem as always on Global communication. If they'd made it clear early on in the campaign, early on that the campaigns might look different on JP to Global, or even addressed it when they were announced, this would just feel like the usual Global wait a few months for the content situation. The way they would have made it clear early on is by not releasing them at all. There's no path that they take that's like, what are they going to do? Release a news statement on Global that's like, JP is about to get the EZAs for LR AGL Gohan and LR Int Cell, but you aren't? Like, what does it mean? Make it clear that we're not, the campaigns might look different. I think even if they had directly stated something like that, that wouldn't really change people. That would honestly probably make it worse for a lot of people if they just clearly stated like, JP is going to get better stuff than you. Like, okay, that to me sounds worse. The way that they address this is by not doing this at all, right? There's no world, basically, this as a conclusion to this point. There's no situation where this can end positively by releasing something for one version and then not releasing something for the other version, while both versions are celebrating the same exact thing. It doesn't make sense. It's not the end of the world. They will come at a later time. It is what it is, but it does kill a bit of the hype when the whole celebration has been pretty much one-to-one in content, and Global just doesn't get it. What would be considered one of the most hype EZAs so far. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's just, it plays right into what we've been discussing this whole time. I agree. All right, Gail, what do we got? We got a discussion here. I think it's extremely rough, to be honest, considering the way it was set up was that it was supposed to be a dual celebration, so we should get both at the same time. But they half-heart it or excuse it by giving us LR Golden Frieza while JP gets the EZAs. I guess that's an interesting way to look at it. They kind of appeased the global audience by throwing in LR Golden Frieza, which they artificially just delayed on Global, right? LR Golden Frieza is a character that we should have had in the game a long time ago. And for whatever reason, they just decided to delay him. I don't want to hear the argument where it's like, oh, well, we had other stuff going on. They had ample time to give us LR Golden Frieza at multiple points since the worldwide celebration. We had multiple opportunities to get him, and they just refused to release him. So I don't want to hear the argument where it's like, oh, well, we had other campaigns and the timeline didn't work. No, we had time to get him, and they artificially delayed his release until now. So it's like they are appeasing the global audience for not getting the Gohan and Cell EZA'S by giving us a character that they artificially delayed the release of. Very good. Very global-esque. That being said, people have blown it a bit out of proportion as we still get them in a few months' time. The main issue is making it a part of the New Year's superhero celebration and Global not getting it, even though we're celebrating it together. Yeah, exactly. That's the point we've been making this whole time. All right, we'll do one more, and then I think we'll wrap it up. If a unit is released at a different time on JP and Global, then I don't have many issues with the version who got it earlier having the EZA before, but these units were released together, and we are in a shared celebration. It really needed to be here, not be delayed for Global. I am 100% agree with this. Again, this aligns pretty much with what we've been discussing the entire time, but I think we've pretty much seen everything we need to see here. I am assuming that how many responses do I have to this, by the way? Let's see. Where was this tweet made? No. Was it? No. Where was it? Yeah, here we go. This tweet has 742 comments. I am assuming that like a good 95+% of these comments and these replies are people who are basically saying the same thing that we've been saying throughout this whole video. So let me know down below what you guys think about the situation, that we've had some time to think it over and, you know, actually not be blinded by anger or whatever. So I think I've pretty much stated everything I have to say about this. The fact that it was the same time celebration is really the catalyst of why people are so upset. And I think people are justified in having the expectation that we would have been getting them at the same time, given that everything else in the celebration was provided at the same time. The banners, the events, the Gogeta and Broly EZA'S. Why was the only thing omitted the Gohan and Cell EZA'S? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't have an explanation for it. It's not a good thing. Not a good thing. And again, the other thing I wanted to mention is just to reiterate the global Dokkan situation. This is not going to be the last time this happens for global Dokkan. So if you're somebody who really does feel bad about this, the way that global was treated, I would highly recommend that you take a look at the JP version and consider switching to the JP version, because this will never happen for you on JP. So hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know down below what you guys think, and I'll see you all in the next one.